Second video today. Kind of following up from the video I made this afternoon on hydrocarbons, the hydrocarbon gods and the green demons. And I want to clarify why I support and believe I don't think we have a choice. We have to have population reduction. Now, when people hear this, and especially people in the alternative scene, when they think of population reduction, they immediately lose their minds and they think, genocide, satanic foils culling the plebs. And that's because they're not listening to they're listening to the wrong people and the wrong side of the story. My belief in population reduction is not the same as Prince Philip or Bill Gates or, the Planned Parenthood. What that is all about, when Bill Gates and Prince Philip talk about, and George Soros and the rest of them like Kissinger, when they go on about population reduction, what they're really saying is kill off as many as you can so we can own everything. That's what it really is to them. So because the more of us there is to them, the more, just by virtue of our economic input and mechanisms, we're taking wealth off them. And that's why they're in favor of population reduction. Now, there's another side to this of other ones who want population reduction so as to save the environment. That's class warfare. That's people who think the countryside and all the beautiful places should only belong to them. They're equally as pathological. They may invoke nature as the reason why, but they're being incredibly dishonest. The reason why I wholeheartedly support population reduction is there's too many bodies, human bodies on the planet. And the reason for that is there's more bodies on the planet than there is souls. The Hindu Brahmins are absolutely correct. There's too many actual bodies of non-semi or limited sentient human forms, but there's very few souls. Well, no, there's millions and millions of souls, sorry. But the problem is when you get a situation where the meat overtake the humans that have souls, what happens then is that this is when humanity starts to go into decay, because the whole concept of things like collectivism and egalitarianism, although on the surface that may seem like, pretty good, it gives everyone a fair share. What you're doing is when you give them a share, the ones that don't have a soul, they're stealing it. They're depleting the rest of us who do. And therefore, they're damaging the condition of the human as a cultural, social, spiritual, artistic, creative force. Now, some of you might be sitting there shocked, and let me explain to you, right? When I first came onto this scene 10 years ago, I used to hear people that were like big stars in it, the likes of, David Icke and Alex Jones and lots of others. They weren't the only ones, saying we have to wake the masses up. Now, from a young age, I always knew that would be a bad idea, because the last thing you want to do is wake them fuckers up, because the first thing, all you have to do is look at when they woke up in the past, and what you got was witch hunts and witch burnings and pogroms and sectarian wars and all this kind of thing. That's not waking them up, that's mobilizing them against their primal fears. And this all comes out of Christianity, of the whole thing. They must be saved. So this is why, the likes of David Icke and Alex Jones, I'm not putting these people down, by the way. Their process is basically a Christian, Presbyterian, save the sinners kind of thing. That's what that is. That's the underlying motivation for it. The whole concept of waking people up, human race, get off your knees, is the same thing as, bringing in the sheaves. It wouldn't exist if we didn't have this Christian notion of proselytization and, converting or bringing home the lambs and all this kind of thing. And so that was a fatal mistake, I always thought. And in the last year, we're now 1 year into the Rona lockdown, look around you. Look around you. honestly look into your heart and look around you at how society has behaved, especially in the recent times. You can absolutely forgive people for the initial fears. I wouldn't, and the anxieties about the virus when it first started. Not for a minute. I wouldn't, resent someone or begrudge someone for feeling that way. Not for a minute. But at this point now, if they're still doing that, if they still think it's, the narrative and they have not even a doubt or an inkling about it, do you think those people are worthy of waking up? And the reason why they're like this is what I just said. They don't have a soul. That doesn't mean we should destroy them. That doesn't mean we should go to war against them or hate them. They're literally just the NPC, the whole NPC meat golem. And in the case of the population, the way to describe it would probably be prosperity golems, because they exist as a result of prosperity. And that includes increasing prosperity in the third world. Now, when I say population reduction, I don't mean, culling people with in whatever ways they say in the conspiracy theorists. They say, oh, like they're culling them with vaccines, or they're culling them with chemtrails and all this stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say population reduction, I mean literally limiting the amount of children that can be born. You know, people say, oh, look around you, the world has gone to shite. The reason why Desmond is amazing exists is because both of his parents are meat with no soul. If either one of Desmond is Amazing's parents had a soul, Desmond is Amazing wouldn't exist, because those parents would instinctually know that what they're doing to that child is evil and wicked and should not be done under any circumstances. But I've seen a show, I think it was Good Morning America, where they wheel him out and grown men in the audience cheering him on like pedophiles. And this whole woke narrative is driven by people. I'm going to tell you something right now. Anyone you know, and this is like a fact. You can take this to the bank. Anyone you know that's woke hasn't got a soul. They even say it like, I don't have a soul. Yeah, so I do science, right? They're literally not lying. They do not have a soul. This is why they can talk in ways that you look and you see them talking about things and you go, that's not my experience of existence, because you're perceiving your experience of existence through the vision of having a soul. They don't have souls. They are literally meat with cognitive functioning that live in the moment, and they're primarily driven by reward and anxiety, avoidance and desire, both drivers and inhibitors. They're a robot, right? Now the rest of us who have souls, who are like watching these videos, and if and other ones out there, I'm not just saying I have the fucking exclusivity on this on our tribe, but there's loads of them, and there's loads of them Christians and Muslims who have souls and stuff like that. But I'm talking about the ones who don't, right? They are the ones who are making life on this planet a living hell for the rest of us who just want to live. So when I saw comments on the video I made today like, oh, what about humanity? Fuck humanity. Fuck them. Save the souls. Because you're going to waste your fucking time and effort saving some fucking meat robot, prosperity golem, who doesn't even know you exist. Save the souls. That's the thing that we have to do. Have to save them. And like I said, this is not a religious thing. There's many atheists who have souls and many agnostics who have souls. They just choose to have a different path to go about it. Now, if you haven't learned this, remember I kept saying from the beginning of the lockdown, I kept saying the greatest education we'll ever get is this, because we finally saw people that we know for what they are, and what we saw was not us. Most of you watching this video were here with me a year ago when I started making these videos on the Rona Chronicles. That's the continuing theme of this. And many of you were shocked back then by the behavior of your family members and your friends and your neighbors and your community and your country, how quickly it could be switched into this state of madness. And like I said, we forgive them the initial lockdown. And then, to see things like, you know, see people say not question things like, you can go to a pub for 90 minutes, but you must have a substantial meal worth no less than €8 with your beer. And then you have to leave after 90 minutes. The sheer madness of that was apparent to anyone with a soul at the time. That was like, what kind of mind would think that up? What kind of mind would think that that would prevent the virus? The ordering of the meal was the actual, the whole thing. Oh, it's designed to keep you there for a certain time and so on, but so you can still have a social life. It would be better if you stayed at home. That was a ritual to humiliate and destroy people. That was sheep dip. And we saw people who did it. And we were like, people going, have you got your COVID, tracing app? I do. They don't have souls, them people. They don't have them. Now, in between, there were people who were frightened and made anxious by the constant fear porn who did have souls. But by now, 99.99999% of them are now awake and on our side this way. But there's still a vast number who are following the narrative. And the ones that are left are not us. Doesn't mean they're evil. It doesn't mean they're horrible, that we should hurt or damage them. We should always have human compassion and decency. We just have to ignore them and get them away from us. And I know people are saying, oh, I didn't know my girlfriend was like this until the Rona. I didn't know my wife or my husband was like this, or my parents were like this. Well, life is about hard lessons, and it's painful, but ultimately it's giving you clarity. It's giving you vision. So when I talk about population reduction, yeah, there's way too many humans. Vast numbers, way more than what this planet can now. And when I say about this planet, people say things like, if you got the whole human population, you give them an acre each in Texas. Sure, they would fit. They'd be all dead within 3 months. This is the nonsense of that. Like the reason why you have these collective and these mass scatterings of humans in cities and other things is because somewhere there's mass agriculture going on where there's no humans, and there's mass industry going on in places like China and India where you don't see it when you're living in suburban Europe or America. And that's a delusion, this whole thing. Yes, technically, a mother, a father, and a child could survive on an acre of land in a decent temperate climate from agriculture, but that's, the people say, well, there's the answer to that, but that's working all the fucking time. You understand? That's, human beings are more than just working. You can say that I can start a farm up. You ever watch those shows they had on TV? They were called like Wilderness Family. There was a very good one from America. Wilderness Family. And they got these these American families, and they stuck them in log cabins, like what would it have been like 1800 in America before like independence, and survived like the families in the wild did, in the Appalachians and so on. And they were intelligent people. They did their thing, and they had to like slaughter farm animals and stuff like that, and they did all that. Then they brought in experts, people who were very well knowledgeable on these subjects. Some of them were like actual like survivalist types. Others were, people had a phenomenal knowledge or grew up even in the Appalachians without electricity or anything like that. And they said the same thing. This family would be dead by December. And they said, but we've got loads of food that we, grain and everything. No, you would have froze to death. I've got a shed full of firewood. He said, and they were cutting firewood constantly. He said, you've got about a month and a half's worth of firewood. After that, you have none. And they were shocked. And they says, we were spending 3-4 hours a day gathering and cutting firewood. And the guy goes, you really should have been spending 5 or 6 hours a day doing it. And they were shocked. But that's what that's so these people are saying, oh, does it, you gave everyone an acre in Australia to live. Does it you fit all the humans in the earth there? It's not about that. It's about resources. It's about resources, okay? And the resources are being eaten up right now by meat golems, prosperity golems, right? Now, there's been no effort made to control population in the third world. And a part of me says it's not up to people in the West to do that. I see the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as basically two Dr. Mengeles killing Africans. And that's what I basically see them as. Because that's driven by they're afraid of people with dark skin. That's just really drives that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So how do they solve that problem? Well, they move all the overpopulated Africans who are a byproduct of overbreeding in Africa because of increased prosperity, and they ship them all into Europe. They ship them all into Europe, right? And but that doesn't solve the problem. Europe is already very heavily overpopulated, so they're taking them out of Africa and moving them into Europe or North America or Canada, Australia, wherever. That's not curing the problem. That's again like the factories this afternoon. Just people have this delusion that somehow the days of heavy industry are gone because all the factories are now in China. They're not. They're not. They still exist, but they're just not in your town anymore. So the population thing is a huge issue. And the reason why is if if we need to have a population that's sustainable in terms of every member of it has a place to live. This is a huge problem, even in Ireland right now. A lack of housing. It's a massive problem. It allows psychopath landlords and government ministers to control people's lives. It's leading to large numbers of homeless on the streets. While they're flooding the country full of immigrants, and it's not only going on in Ireland, homelessness, and you got look in America, the homelessness is shocking in many, especially I couldn't believe what I was seeing in Houston. You would never see that in Dublin. I thought Dublin was bad, but it's nothing compared to that. And you don't have these homeless cities and all this kind of thing. In Manila, in the Philippines, there's something like 700,000 homeless children in one city. 700, and that's not the Irish version of homeless, where the government pays to keep you in a hotel or something like that. That's the Filipino version of homeless, which is literally sleeping with the rats in the street. And that's one city. That's overpopulation. That is overpopulation. And then you have, this is a big, and there's other things too, like so the best way to deal with this, obviously, is to use birth control and say to people, the best way of doing it in the West is to say something like, you can have 2 kids max. If you have a third kid, we'll tax you to hell. There's all the birth control you need to avoid being taxed into oblivion. That's a humane way of doing it, because you're still allowing people the satisfaction and enjoyment who want that of parenting, but you're also creating a line in the sand where you say you can parent so much and that's it. You can parent so much and that's it. And that's just that's it. So therefore, it's like that I don't see any problem with that, because the solution, the other version of that is something like Logan's Run, where they're going to actually start killing people and culling them, or in a more natural state where they'll say no more African immigration. Well, what about the overpopulation of Africa? And they go, what about the overpopulation of South America? Not our problem. What about the overpopulation of China? Not our problem. Look. In China right now, people are eating their own babies. People are eating their daughters, because in China they have a one-child policy. Nature calls, the birds and the bees, and a Chinese woman finds herself pregnant. You have to pay for an abortion there. She doesn't have the money. She has the baby. They eat the baby. That is why we need population reduction. That's because so many Chinese exist now. We are very far from the world of Confucius, that the country is overpopulated with robots, meat robots. And these meat robots don't have the time they haven't, because there's only so many souls can fill those bodies. And so eating a baby to them, or eating a puppy, or even kittens, is the same thing as going, eating a steak or something. Yes, I know there's all kinds of arguments there, and I'm not crazy, and I'd love to see farming change back to normal. But we could stop the industrialization of farming and have proper farms where animals graze, like, without having to be in factory pits, if we reduce the population. So many problems are caused by over. Oh, look, I walk, I see this. It doesn't matter. We're talking about resources. When you see a human being, what you're looking at is 70 plus years of resources. Human being is a body that needs so many resources, right? The problem is we cannot produce the resources. So say like 100 years ago, the city of Paris, every roof was producing so much food, right? So much food in Paris that the city of Paris was exporting food. How it was doing it was just growing on the rooftops of buildings. That's a fantastic way of doing it. We could do that. But again, there's too many people now. And instead of, and there's so many things we could do. And the problem, we're going to have to face this population reduction thing one way or another. Because I can tell you, we have to have a sustainable population where we're not working all the time. If we're not working all the time, this allows the development of art and science and philosophy and natural philosophy and creativity and the joys of life. Otherwise, we will have so many people that there'll be a complete lack of resources, and we will live like Winston Smith in 1984. Or if we can't go back to a system where we're all living in the wilderness. As I told you about those wilderness families, you literally are working from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, just so you don't freeze to death in winter. And those people were sustained by things like prayer and stuff like that back in the old days. Can't have that either. So when I hear these people in the alternative saying, the elites are trying to reduce the population, my caveat to that is they're trying to reduce the population for their own selfishness, greed, and power. But reducing the population itself is a noble thing, because it will take away the problem that we have in the world, made apparent by the lockdown and the behavior of your neighbors, friends, family members, and people in your community, and removing bodies from the planet so that every birth that happens, a soul enters that body. A soul enters that body. And you don't have a situation where a mobile piece of meat is spewed out of a woman's vagina, and it has nothing in there except a conditioned response to impulses and desires, wants, triggered by either reward, pleasure receptors, or anxiety. Okay? They're not living, those people. That's why when you approach them and say, "Can you not see there's a problem here?" And they go, "Hmm, hmm, hmm, hmm." Tell me you've not had those conversations over the lockdown in the last year. Tell me you've not walked with the people and go, "That thing with the fucking, you have to order a cheeseburger or something with your beer and chips, makes no sense." Hmm, 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 hmm. Wearing two masks makes no sense. Hmm, hmm, hmm. Ah, sure. Hmm. Right. Uh, if you haven't met them this year, probably one of them. You're probably one of them if you haven't encountered that this year and wanted to go, "Jesus Christ. Why can't you fucking see what the bullshit that's going on here?" If it's a pandemic, and then especially like the Sweden one, if you go to the Sweden one, you'll either get the fight or flight thing. The fight thing is like, oh, they had a much higher debt rate in Sweden than we have. Well, over the course of this thing, when it ends, we will see when they quantify and tally up all the numbers, just how much more Sweden have. I have a feeling that it'll probably be the same or less. We're just seeing current numbers coming in, when we finally find out who actually died of COVID and who didn't, we'll see the real numbers of Sweden. That's the fight one. Oh, how can you say that? Sweden had so many more deaths than we did. And then the other side of that is, so, Sweden is opened up and life is going on there. They just applied caution in terms of things like they made sure the vulnerable were locked up and kept safe, and not everyone. You know, you see, if you haven't met them this year, probably one of them. There's thousands of them. There's thousands of them out there. There's also people who are semi-sentient who may have started off like being frightened by the lockdown, and now they're fully come around to consciousness. They would have had a soul to begin with. It might have been. It might. See, a lot of societies exist to destroy your soul. That's the purpose of it. It's soul education, especially. That's why the kids. I mean, I saw a thing today for the Los Angeles school districts where they're showing a little cartoon they've made, paid for by Microsoft, of course, where you basically your child goes in with a bar reader code in their hand, this to prove that they haven't got COVID, and that way it'll be safe for the teachers. Take your fucking, if that's the kind of school you have, get your kids out of those school ASAP, fucking AP. So that's what I mean by population reduction and why I support it. I fully support. I don't ask me what numbers there are, but all I know is, let me give you an example. Go to YouTube and look at interviews with communities, say in the 60s, in the 40s, in the 20s, and then audios before that. The average person is in a much better state. They're cognitive, they're talkative, they're intelligent, and you can actually see that declining from the 80s on. So whatever the population was in the 70s appears to be the number of souls that there was. After that, it started to go down rapidly, and then you can sort of you saw the sort of cognitive decay of society, and people are so quick to say, oh, it's the television, oh, it's the internet, oh, it's fast food. No, they're born without souls. That's what's going on. Because there's more bodies on the planet than there are human beings. And you're surrounded by meat robots. And that's why I support population reduction through voluntary and, sweeteners such as tax punishment for a parent who and other things that has 3 kids. 2 is enough. 2 is enough, and that's it. And then people who don't have, you see, the system is all fucked up as well. A lot of young people get married and have kids because they're being punished by the tax system. Now they're probably, I know that's a weird thing to say, but they do that. Say I had a situation where childless couples, and I'm not saying this because I'm childless myself, but say a childless individual gets a massive tax break. Childless couples pay no income tax. They pay no income tax. And then you will see their standard of living greatly increase. You see, like I always, from a kid, I always noticed that the biggest morons always have the most kids. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed that I saw that growing up in Ballymun, the biggest morons always got pregnant first and had the most kids. Because again, they're just meat. They're driven by basic primal desires, fears, anxieties, and inclinations through a reward or anxiety trigger mechanism. Always. This is the problem, and half their kids are like fucking monkeys that can barely communicate. This kind of thing, and you see it all the time, and you see it more and more. So I think whatever the population was, 4 or 5 billion back in the 70s, is probably we're looking at double that now. It's probably the optimum population for the earth in terms of souls. I'm just like, this is just something I'm arbitrarily just throwing out there. But the simple fact is that population reduction is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. Why? Because people who want to live the 70 plus years of life to create and to enjoy and share and do good by humanity are being inhibited by see what I'm saying? Population reduction is a good thing, not Prince Philip's airborne virus population. There's just too many motherfuckers on this planet.